Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have on our episode of Unsung Heroes, Henriette Abrahams. She's a hero and lifelong activist, a support person for everybody in Bonteheuwel. We just were chatting offline, and she says the people expect her to know everything, from law to medicine to food to shelter to psychiatry. And sometimes she calls on her networks, and their help was always there. And I'm introducing, good morning, Henriette. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show. An absolute hero in my eyes. And this is what the show is all about, just to give recognition to the people that has contributed. Thank you. I hand it over to you.
Hi, morning, Sean. Thank you for having me on your program or your documenting of unsung heroes and activists. So I don't know where you want me to start, really. Anyway,
just a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you were born. Were you born in Bonteheuwel? Were you part of growing up? Who was your mother? Who was your father? Who was your role models? I know I've obviously seen Action Commandant,
Okay.
and I know that Ashley played a big role in bringing you into the struggle. But I'm sure there was other influences as well. I think you were at Bonteheuwel High as well.
Yes.
So there must have been teachers involved, and just giving them a little bit of recognition for what they did and helped and so on. So I'll leave it to you to just take it from there.
Okay, if I have to start at the beginning, I always go on. I'm a grandmother's child, so I was reared by both my grandmothers in various times of my life. With my mother being in on the periphery, literally. I'm the eldest of a long line of eldest. So I'm the eldest daughter, but also the eldest child, the only daughter and the eldest child. The eldest on both sides of my paternal and maternal grandchildren as well. So a lot, with eldest, there's a lot of pressure having to go out, excel, do your best, take care of others, and so forth. So yes, I grew up around the corner, 99 Jackals Play, with my grandparents. Went to school at Pioneer, which is now E.A. Janari, named after our principal back then, Mr. Janari. And from there, I went to Bonteheuwel High. Bonteheuwel High, I always think that I'm born in 1970. I'm 15 a couple of weeks' time.
Oh, well done.
So I always thought that people born late 60s, early 70s were the luckiest of people, because we've seen so much in this country of ours. We've experienced the apartheid, we fought the apartheid, got the new dispensation, brought about freedom, or so we thought. Little did we know we did not have economic freedom, and that 25 years later we will still be stuck in the same rut. So we have experienced such a lot, and we've been part of such a lot, part of breaking down the old, part of building the new, and yet today we find ourselves of breaking down what we put in place, right? I always tell others that we haven't finished our work. If we had done our work properly and efficiently as we should have, as what we fought for, we would not have sat in this situation that we are sitting. We would have not sat with leadership and corruption, leadership that's high up there and forgotten about the people and selling the people out. So our task today is rebuilding, continuing in our social justice work, and rebuilding people's power, in my mind, going back to our days of UDF, where we organize communities, not where we organize organizations, mobilize organizations and NGOs, but people's power, going back to our streets and building. Back in the day, in the 80s, we were like hundreds and thousands involved. So we have to get to that point, and where we take back and say, enough is enough. This is our time. Some of the people, my peers, They are grandparents now. We were involved back then, so we know what we wanted. So this is the last leg of us having to fight for what it is that we want.
And just to interrupt, the sad part is that we are grandparents now,
Yes.
and we still have to fight.
Yes.
I mean, we would have thought by now things would have settled down, that our kids would have been okay,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
But at this stage, and yeah, I just want to come in. I saw you on TV a while ago. It wasn't that long ago. I think a year ago. I know that person on TV, you know.
Okay.
And for this time, you just mentioned that you're going to be 50 soon, to still be fighting on the streets and physically taking on the system and saying, no, man, this isn't right.
Yes.
It is a bit sad, probably a bit exciting as well, taking a little back to our youth and what we did in our youth. But it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be better.
Yes.
And I'll just let you go on from there.
Exactly. So having to just go back, being 50 and starting at the young age of 13.
Sure.
Right? So there's a lot of years. There's a lot of years there. There's a lot of experience there. So I remember I was a little girl in standard 6. What is it now?
Grade 8.
Grade 8. Right? So that time we had, remember, sports was a big thing on schools, inter-houses and inter-schools and all of those champs of champs. So I was some bit of an athlete, not on the track, field, discus, what is it?
Shot put.
Discus, shot put and javelin.
Okay.
We had amazing javelin and discus. There was cattle fabric comes to mind. The Cox comes to mind because they set Sasa records and so forth.
Sure.
So we had amazing talent, and every year it's champ of champs. It's they go to nationals and so forth. But nevertheless, so during this time, so it's nice time. Sports time was always nice time at school and so forth. So during this time, I think it was about in January, beginning of Feb, Ashley came into our class. Ashley Krill, this is now. So he was on school. He was standard 9. I was standard 6. And he came around to do SRC elections, and he asked, explained to us what the SRC is, and each class needed to have 2 reps, and because I had a big mouth, they said, Henriette can go because she has a big mouth, and so I was like,
always talkative.
And very tomboy, so I played like soccer with the boys, I had my say and all of those things. Eventually I got elected. Myself and Calvin, and we were the stake of standard 6s,
Unbelievable.
And then we had elections, and Oswald Barnes was elected as the chairperson, and Ashley the secretary, and Ashley's like next to me in the bench, saying, "Will you stand for the secretary, the deputy secretary?" I said, "What is a deputy secretary? I don't know." "No, I will show you, I will help you," and so forth. Nevertheless, so eventually I agreed, and then as a standard 6 pupil, I became SRC executive. And that was in 1984, right? So tagged along him, meetings, went to BISCO meetings, went to UDF pamphleteering on the station, on the center, wherever, just helping. Okay, this is my new pastime. I'm part of this tribe now, so follow the tribe leader type of thing. Okay, so 84, 85, July, so 85 again on the SRC. July 85, we started boycotts, right? We started the boycotts. I remember the Kinross mine disaster. I remember the Roundtree, the Plascon strike. And I remember Ashley saying, those are our parents and we need to support our parents. Our struggles aren't isolated from our parents. And so from a young age, I was introduced to capitalism and what capitalism is and how it is oppressive and how the Boers and the ministers are stuffing their bag. Listen to the same thing, how the Boers and the ministers are stuffing their pockets with money that's meant for the poor. Yeah. So isn't that the same thing that we are saying today? So it's how many years, right? So of course, then we started having awareness programs and all of these things, right? So awareness, we used to call it alternative programs, right? People's education. So we started to having the boycotts, having alternative education, having our marches, supporting civic. I remember how when the civic gave in eviction notices or they broke people's things out, how we would go to the rent office in support of our parents, and emptying the bins there and so forth and so on.
And
So
just on that, it's extremely progressive for Bonteheuwel. You know, while others were still wondering what's happening, Bonteheuwel was on the forefront of the struggle. You know,
we were
good leadership,
lucky.
I suppose.
We were lucky, you see. If I look, sometimes I think
Just,
if you look back at how young we were back then. So I think of Joseph Aranis, Nazim Tramat, Desmond Grootboom, all of these people, how young, these are Tussen Shanasana, but they were older than me on school, Ashley's age. But then those ones who weren't at school, Trevor Barron and all of them who weren't at school, they were not that old. They were like in their 20s, and that was leadership. That was leadership, and strong and very clear leadership,
Absolutely.
and hard workers. So we had a passion and a commitment for what we believed in. Then there was the Quentin Michaelses and the Leon Scotts and all of those people that they were in the Bonteheuwel youth movement. So I come just off the cusp of Bonteheuwel youth movement, and then we started Keiko. So I was in Keiko, and they were the ones before. But then they got married and started their lives and moved out and so forth. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, they went underground and they were busy in MK structures and so forth. So we were very young and we had a very brilliant leadership. For me in Bonteheuwel, we had a brilliant leadership, and people knew who did what. Remember that time we screen printed our own sweaters. We did our own banners. We wrote up our own. We had specific people that these are your media people, these are your speakers, these are your people that's carrying the weight type of thing. These are your people that do your pamphleteers, your door-to-doors, and so forth and so on. So we had a lot of skills amongst ourselves, and we always made sure that we trained and developed others.
I'm just gonna interrupt you there. I had an interview with Donnie Jurgens.
Yes, I saw.
And Donnie was mentioning exactly the same things you saying now. You were saying with this, although it was a difficult time for us, but the amount of organization that came out of it, the skill, the college education that we had on the ground was amazing.
Yes.
And this is exactly what you're mentioning now.
So don't you want to switch the lights on there behind you? Both of them. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So you had these young people, which I thought was all at the time because they were outside of school. These young people knowing what they are doing, right? So when I was in Bisco, so Bisco is the Bonteheuwel Interschools Bisco is the Bonteheuwel Interschools Congress, right? And that was started by Ashley and Trevor and them and others, right? So it's the 3 high schools that's together and working. So as far as I can remember, we were part of COSAS, because I remember going on a train, going to meetings, COSAS meetings and so forth.
There were so many of them.
Yes, be they in New South offices. I remember Richard Martin still being a COSAS organizer, be it in New South offices in Observatory or in somewhere in Rocklands in Mitchells Plain. We would run.
Never keep it in one place at the same time.
So it would be here, there. So I remember we were in this COSAS meeting in New South offices there in Observatory, close to Station Road, and when we got back to Observatory Station or Salt River Station, we heard the news, or in the newspaper, COSAS was banned. So that was 1985. It was 85, 86, 80. So COSAS was banned. And then The next thing I remember, everything happened so quick. So there was some Menenberg, Mario Wanza was there, Rasida Mokwa was there, Jenica was there. Those of us that's coming from the Kosas meeting now, we were like, Kosas is banned, so on and so on. The next thing I remember us being in Johnny Issel's house in Belgravia Road. Zain Zamar, us, Ashley, Gary Halsman, whoever. So we were a couple of people or student leadership from various areas, so a couple of areas. I think what we're going to do now with Kosas being banned, so we need to work for alternative organization A, B, and C. And so I was part, as young as I was part of that discussion and what we're going to do and so forth. So we organized still. So because Bisco was actually established before other SACs were ASAC and whatever. So we had MIPSCO and BISCO and ASAC and what was it, MESCO and TOSCO, all of these student organizations was like the like the Congress line. So we worked and we put together WEXCO. So WEXCO is the Western Cape Schools Congress. And WEXCO was literally the substitute for COSAS, right? You remember like SACTU and COSATU. So we found replacement organs for banned organizations. Yes. So with the launch of WEXCO, we had it at UCT. We worked our asses off. Rowena, my best friend and sister for years, Jumat. So I remember Grox used to live a couple of streets from here. So he was a very good artist. We had a couple of good artists. Remember when we had the UDFF and the COSATU and everybody, the hand was there, people marching when you talk logo and all of those things. So we went to a fellow high school student and Bisco member of ours. Said, Grox can draw quite, let's go to Grox. And he drew the WEXCO banner for us, the logo and the banner and all of those things. And we launched at UCT, all the buses were here picking.
Just to stop you quickly there, it's something that you don't normally recognize. Is this guy a normal guy? He's just an artist, but he was actually part of the movement.
He was our go-to guy. Him and David Abrahams and Styles, Andre Robertson, they were our go-to guys for banners. And Trevor Barron, of course. We spent endless nights in Cape Arts Project, painting and doing our banners, or in churches, in church halls, in school halls, locking ourselves up overnight to finish banners and sweaters, you know. So nevertheless, so we launched Christopher Mawil Radlich. She was also in school with me. We've launched WEXCO at UCT. The buses had to go from various areas too, and then the police then obviously stopped the buses and they beaten our children off the buses and so forth. Many of us couldn't, even I couldn't get to the launch, but Christopher, some of us could come through and others couldn't, you know. Tear gas was fired. We were forever moved. So we had running battles here in Bonteheuwel all the time. And so a lot of that happened. So when WEXCO was launched, I was the very first general secretary of WEXCO, elected the very first general secretary. So there was a number of us. So Sisley Moon, today is Dr. Sisley Moon, he was the chairperson. Henry from Tosco was the Thuraya Pandy was the treasurer. Mark Lockman, he's deceased. I wonder what Mulokis would have done today. He was from Spacebona. He was also our education
and if I
officer.
Just listen to the names, and in terms of what you just mentioned earlier offline, is that this network of people that we know, and it's people's names. If you listen to the names, it's an important guy, I know that guy, whatever, you know. So it's incredible who was involved.
Yes, we come from there, so that consciousness is there, and people have moved and grown in various directions, you know. So yes. So it was student struggles after student struggle after student struggle. There was a lot of repression. We went through a lot of repression, and you can't change your history. Bonteheuwel was very active. We suffered a lot. We had people in and out of jail all the time. all the time. In my little life, over a span of 3 years, I think I was locked up 14 times. The longest stint being 5 months in Paulsmoor, right? And then that was my matric year, right? So that was the day I got my report. I passed to matric, and over Christmas, over Easter type of thing. So a lot of us, what killed me actually was Christopher Moe Rutledge, Moe, our friend. What killed me, we went on to a Wexco workshop, we came back, and Auntie Rhoda came to fetch us at the drop-off point. He said to me, Hina, you must come to me, you can't go to Bonteheuwel. I said, why? And then she said, Moe has been arrested under Section 29. And Moe was 16 years old. So him and I on the same school, same structure, so forth. So I just broke down when she told me that. And that comes off the back of Ashley being killed, eh? So that, there's a photo that I have. So Ashley was killed. Ashley left, right? Obviously we always built in 2-3 tier leadership, right? So Ashley left and we had to step up. Corey and myself and others had to step up and take over leadership. Then Anton and Corey left. A lot of us became burnt out. So some people also, we were sent away to go and rest and so forth. I never went away to rest. I just kept on. And if you look at how we lived, I was on school and I was on the run for almost 3 years of my life. So being that young age, being on school, not knowing where you're sleeping, Trevor Barron was our person that would sort out safe houses, for instance. You would sleep here, you and that person would sleep there. You must move from now. You can't be. This place isn't safe anymore. So forth and so on.
I'm just going to interrupt. Yeah, I had another interview with the Iran SWAT in the I think it was last week on Sunday, and one thing that came out from this thing is that many of us, or our people, not me so much, but many of our strugglers and comrades actually suffered from stress, post-traumatic stress. And we should have had counselors coming to us and helping us. Listen, we've gone through this, but there was nothing. You know, we didn't go through that process, and a lot of hurt and anger still resides inside a lot of people because of that. And like I said, you were a youngster. You literally gave up your life.
My youth, I don't know what it is to have a youth.
There's no youth. And in structures and in training and you just didn't have time to play. Some people are still playing with dolls at the time.
Look pretty and have a boyfriend, making eyes at a boyfriend. There was none of that. There was like work. So it's going to school, catch a train, go to a meeting, be it at UWC Weinberg, in Cooks, wherever. It was like we had a full-time job as students already.
And when you're at school, you have to look at over your back all the time. Is the police coming to check who's going to be arrested next, type of thing. So it was crazy.
So you're in school, so forth and so on. Everybody's checking and so forth. My father had a strategy, so he would monitor the school and check where the vans are going and so forth. So we had the small gate on the front on that side, the S&O side, and then we had the bigger gate. We had 3 gates to our school. So if you would see that the vans are coming, so forth and so on, then he would come with a bicycle and stand with a bicycle. He would just like drive around. If it's time to go, then he would be ready with a bicycle for me to get out.
Sure.
Yes,
like that. Dad was one of your
he was very When I came, Daddy, do you know about the ANC and Nelson Mandela and so on? What Jay? And then he was very proud, Mary, that his daughter was involved. You must remember, my father was a Rasta also. So, and he was involved on a peripheral level, and he was very conscientious, and he could tell me the history of the Rivonia trials, tell me the history of the ANC and Brown Fishery, and all of these things. Rita, what you're doing, you must you must be careful, so forth and so on, so meanwhile, he's also been doing his own support work, buying in arms and all of those things for MK members and so forth, and taking people to the borders and so on.
once again, I'm just
Yes.
stopping you. Unsung heroes
Yes.
everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, that people don't even know about.
Mm.
That hasn't been told and hasn't been explored. I had the privilege of watching the Salt River high school's role in the 1976 riots.
Lovely.
And one of the things that came out, one of the kids that were arrested, there was I think 10 boys, all your the age that you were when you were at Bonteheuwel High, 13, 14, just got onto high school, and they were all arrested. They burnt books outside
Yeah,
the Salt River,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they were anyway. One of the things that came out, one of the boys that was arrested, his dad was also involved. And when they arrested the boy, they linked him to the dad, and they arrested, while the boy was in, they incarcerated the father as well. And it was actually a bit of a sad moment, you know, how the things interlink with each other. And like you said, there's a lot of unsung heroes, people that we don't recognize, and we think, my dad was just there for us, or my mom or whatever, but we don't give them the recognition that they actually truly deserve, you know. Sorry, I do interrupt so now and then, but
Okay,
go
no
ahead.
problem. So yes, there was a lot of trauma, and we were too young. So I think that is where it was SSCC and WPCC where they gave some money for people to go away. I don't know if Pusak's office was also in, so you had to take out 2 weeks, otherwise you get burnt out. But the work just had to continue, and so many of us went into prison all the time, you know. So you have to stand in for the one, and you have to keep safe. You have to ensure that you have to keep safe. We worked out a strategy that should you get caught, you must, these are the things you can tell the police, these are the things you must come back and you must brief us. What have you said? What didn't you say? So remember, there was, you were a traitor, you were informer, you were this, all of those things. So we established like rules
and I think one of the rules, if I remember correctly, was to give the comrades about, I think, 24 hours or 12 hours before you actually
start stalking and so forth,
just to give them a chance, because they can't expect you. There was no expectation that you're not gonna give in, because these guys were murderous, you know.
So we had a choice, you know, and Ashley has also said and led that we knew we were a hotspot, even though Adrian Flock, Minister of Police that time, said that Bonteheuwel is a hotspot, and that they pounced on us. So we knew we either had to go out of the country or we had to fight and die, you know. So we had our choices, and we lived our slogans. We didn't just sloganize, we lived it. So when Ashley died, Anton died, I remember us looking for photos of Anton, photos of this, photos, and we couldn't find nice photos. So Ozzy and myself, Oswald, went to visit Joe Aranis, and Joe was doing journalism, and he had a camera, of course. He said, sit daar, kom, ons vat julle photos. We had to sit, I still have today, we have to sit like that. But I said, if you die, we don't have a photo of you for the poster.
Crazy. And I assume, I must probably stick to English for the purposes of the people that watch the show. But it's so typical, and part of this whole thing that I'm creating here is to tell the stories. And you were mentioning now about if you die, at least we've got this photo of you. Yes. Now the same with our older people that was involved in the struggle. A lot of them are reaching their 70s, their 80s, they are dying, but they're dying with their stories. I know one of my comrade friends said that she's got the perfect person to come tell the stories, and I think the person is 83 or something like that. I must come see her, and we'll set up. We lose that. We lose that story.
We lose it. I used to like Mr. Jansen. It's we used to stay here in Bonteheuwel Avenue. Theo and Andre and them, Jansons and Lindsay and them, their grandfather, used to listen to him. On a Friday night, I would go next door and listen to him. He used to work in the 60s with Brown Fisher and then with the SACP. He's been working, And I always said that Mr. Jansen's story must be recorded, and I've never recorded his story. My life was too busy. Neither did his grandchildren, I think. But the rich histories of the 1960s and how him and Brown Fisher and them organized these the Cape Town for that matter. So we lost those. That's gold nuggets that we've lost. You know.
And the thing is, the sad part is that the grandchildren can tell a bit of the story. You can tell a bit of the story, but the real story,
the real and the authentic story,
that's not there.
Yes.
So you're getting bits from each
Yes.
person, but that true story that's there was a little bit lost. Although we give recognition to them and so on, but that real story is lost through time.
I just want to, like, in this thing, I just want to thank our parents. No? We had the most beautiful and wonderful parents. They gave so much, right? We were the comrades in our various organizations, the youth and civic and students and wherever else. And we had the parent support group, right? So the mothers were going through the same things, children on the run, children in jail, children in exile and so forth. So they needed a lot of trauma support and those things also. So Reverend Charles Martin from the Congregational Church, he kept them together and worked with them and so forth. So a lot of that work has been going, a lot of support amongst themselves. So Trevor and I was caught together, for instance. Trevor, myself, Moe, a couple of us were at the same time from Bonteheuwel was in Polsno prison and so forth. So they would organize amongst themselves, that they would see the lawyers together, that they would come and visit us together, that they share resources and so forth. They would even look after other people's children, you know, in places of need. Like if I think of Mrs. Dramat, Auntie Wasila, Ma Scott, Auntie Aziza, Khali, Auntie Evie, the Holzmans, the Krills, Auntie No, what was her name, Auntie No? There were so many, Donna, so many parents and women in particular that looked after us, that opened their doors. Mrs. Kuti, late Mrs. Aranas, you know, when we were having running battles here on the center with the police and so forth, burning places down and buses down and whatever, throwing stones, running, carrying out looting trucks. There was a lot of stuff going on. Then I would run in here opposite by Mrs. Aranas or by Mrs. Kuti, and I would put on disguise. I would put on an overall and a doek and take a child and push a child in a pram and walking past the scene that I'm just coming from now, you know. So everybody was opening their doors for us, giving us places to sleep. En het jy al geëet al, Auntie Faiza Isaac, het jy al geëet al my kind, kom in hier so, woe, ek gaan dit my, sy die boere soek vir jou, hulle was nou daar by Faiza, so jy gaan dit uit, so nou, ek is nog in die shower, just so dress over, didn't even put my underwear on. I ran into Mrs. Kuti's house because Auntie Faiza was afraid that the cops is going to come to our house now to look for me.
Just on that, if I can quickly intervene again, is with all this fighting and running, when did you actually have time to learn? Like besides the learning, I'm talking now the education of the Gatti education that it was called at the time. Was there any time for learning? Actually, did you actually get a chance to actually do any schoolwork? Because you were more on the run than anything else.
Yes. To tell you the absolute truth, no, there wasn't. For me, there wasn't. The only time I learned was when I was actually in school and if there was a class. If there was teaching happening in the class. Now, luckily for me, I always thought I was intelligent, but I'm not. Luckily for me, I have a good memory retention. So I tend to remember, and I was very good with figures. Remembering figures, numbers, all of those things. And I have a photographic memory, so if a teacher would sit and give a lesson, everything would stick here. I don't have to write it out. I remember one time the accountancy inspector came, and Mrs. Jacobs was our accounting teacher, and she said, "Henriette, just leave this. There's nothing in my books, nothing written in my books, but I would get a 95%,
Wow.
97%
Wow.
mark at when it comes to exams, you know.
Fantastic.
So I was gifted in
That
or blessed
sense.
in that sense, you know. But the learning wasn't. When I was in matric, actually, when I passed, I sat in Polsmoor, like Moe and I were both matric in Polsmoor. And others, Mahboul, Moors, Mark Splinters, Yasser Splinters, all of them were all at the same time over Christmas. They just locked us up good that year.
Sure.
So a lot of reading took place.
Okay.
So, but now, and the nicest thing, because my class was a very tensy, we were a very good class, a very tight class, because we came from standard 7 right through to standard 10, so you tend to have that, and you like a family.
Camaraderie.
Yes. So Wendy would do all my bio, Christine would do all my maths, this one would do all my history, that one would keep my books up to date for when I'm coming out. And meanwhile, I'm just reading my time away in prison, doing my work. So when I came out, I could then again assist them in terms, because I've read and reread and reread. You get what I'm saying? So that was quite. So when I came out, the one thing that people can learn from us back then, we never for long. We believed in building capacity and building new leadership. So if you were standard 10, you couldn't stand for elections for SRC or for Wexco or for BISCO or whatever. You had to make sure that you bring up others and you assist. Same with the youth and so forth. So in the youth, I was always in the youth, and as I moved out, I became always the women's convener or education officer or things like that. Always to do with gender equality or education. We must remember that we went to Europe, we went for training schools, we had winter schools, we had workshops, we had a lot of training and a lot of stuff. And as students already, we held our own workshops. Marie Mitchell and Mansoor and a lot of people, they taught us how to train and facilitate and all of those. So we were facilitators, young facilitators at a young age already. So I was in matric, board, I can't be in leadership position here at the bottom. I'm moving out of what I'm doing all the time. Right, what am I going to do now? Okay, let's start UCO. So the United Women's Congress. So I was a matriculant on my bicycle organizing women, our mothers that I was speaking about earlier on. The mascots, Auntie Ivis, Mrs. Halsman, them, Auntie Nas, Auntie Aziza was our chair. So here's an 18-year-old, not even 18 years, yeah. Here's an 18-year-old organizing the oldest, I think my mascot, she was 17, right? So organizing women, UCO members around women's issues and gender equality. So we were quite UCO brides. We organized, we did our own, those women, we did our own t-shirts. We got the cheapest t-shirts, nice quality, in the Highlands, highlight somewhere at the back there. White, but UCO is black and green. We dyed it in Ma's yard. In hot boiling water on the fire, we dyed those t-shirts, wringing it, washing it, ironing it, and then printing it. Our banner we made on Ma's bed. The newspapers at the bottom, but we did it ourselves.
And look at the
skills
development.
We did it ourselves. These are our mothers. We're going to teach them how to do it. We're going to take pride. So everybody sat up. When we launched, we got is it Noma India, Noma Chala, Cheryl. We've got UCO province members coming to launch us, of course, and had our elections in Modadam Hall, and we were proud women. And if ever there's anything that I'm the proudest of, was me, this youngster, working with our mothers, organizing our mothers, and bringing them to a level of activism. Because now they felt, we've got our own organization. We're no longer just the parent support group. We're working for the women, and we're going to work for A, B, and C. And we worked that was so quiet for me. So nevertheless, okay, so then the 90s happened, the talks happened, people went to prison, finished. Oh, so I was involved in the youth and in wake school. Now you're taking up leadership positions within. So the youth was students, varsity students, pupils, school pupils, youth, the YCS, the young Christians, whatever there was, the young Christians. But there was a couple of youth, and we formed the youth. And Keiko, that was before Seiko. Then it was time to make application to university. So I was really there, part of that youth and leadership school and whatever. You know, the NECC, that committee, and the youth there as a cluster and so forth. I'm making application to UWC for law, and I'm making application to Pentec for dentistry. I always had a fascination with teeth. So I got accepted for both.
Wow.
And I got a scholarship for what is a bursary. But meanwhile, those people said they're waiting for me, UWC. So I knew that should I go to university, should I study? I'm not going to study. I'm going to be a Cecil Iso and a Michael Abrams. I'm going to be in politics there from year to year and take so long to finish my degree. So I went and I did a legal secretarial course 6 months, and then I worked for the UDF. I was the UDF administrator, Western Cape administrator. So I thought, let me rather go and do this, because if you should go and study, you're just going to mess it up. You're going to be involved in politics and nothing else, right? So I did that. You can go and study later. So I did that. So being in the UDF office, so Cameron, myself, Kev, we worked under, then it was Trevor, Willie Hofmeyer, Bulelani, Dalaoma, Cheryl. Those were our bosses, Johnny Delanga, and so forth. So there I could continue with my organizing skills. Remember, I'm coming now from Wexco on a provincial level, and now I'm going to the UDF office on a provincial office level. So just continue with your organizing, mobilizing skills,
and this is whatever. In the 90s, and I think by this time, yes, like you say, they were already busy with negotiations. Yes. So it was like very involved.
So the quiet thing of that was that it was the time of the unbanning of the ANC. The ANC was just about to get unbanned. It was the time of the RNC, the Release Mandela and Other Political Prisoners program. So I was there in the center of all of those things, having to set up, knowing, okay, who's coming out, connecting with Cowley House, setting up the welcoming committees and making sure that people are sorted out and so on. So in the midst of all of those things, setting up ANC branches because we're going to close down. I went down, myself, Cameron, and Kev with the bus and Willie, and we closed down the UDF. Today, I think it was a mistake.
Absolutely.
You know, we closed it down in
Bonteheuwel. And just on that, the leadership that was there, incredible leadership.
Yes.
Yourself,
yes.
Willie Hofmeyer, them yes. all.
Even
people
like
with integrity,
the national people, Popo Malefe, Elijah Bahai, a number of them, Murphy Morobe. I knew those names. I worked with them. I phoned. I was a stroppy administrator. Who is this? So you must phone Elijah Bahai or Murphy Morobe, and then I would say, but that does not make sense, comrade. I'm a youngster. That doesn't make sense, comrade. But if we do A, B, and C, that won't work, and so forth and so on. It's like,
who are you?
Hey, well, who are you? The leadership, so forth. You an administrator. I said, no, but comrade, the conditions on the ground does not dictate for such and such an action and A, B, and C, and so on. So at the end of the day, I'm not putting a feather in my cap. So when we disbanded the UDF, then I was asked by the Murphys and the Valemusas and Terra Lokotas and whatever, that stroppy Western Cape administrator must come down to come. Comrade, you must come down and you must, all of those. So that was, it was sad to close it down, but at that time we thought it was the right decision. It wasn't my decision, I was but an administrator, but today I think it was the biggest mistake. We should have just continued and hold form. So yes,
Listen, I'm going to sort of
this is too much.
yeah, it's gone over, but it's fine. It goes it's the clips goes to 4 gig, then it goes over and it becomes another 4 gig, so it's fairly big. With
Do you want to pause it?
no, it's absolutely fine. It's still going. It automatically goes into the second half, so it's split it into two. The I had the same with Yalan. We were supposed to speak for half an hour, 20 minutes. It landed up an hour and a half. And these are stories that you can't tell over 20 minutes. It is impossible. In fact, we need 3 or 4 days. But just to condense the program, that doesn't take too long, that people can just maintain the interest. If I can ask you, we've got such a sad history, and you were saying that you had this photographic brain. We could have been so different if it wasn't for the apartheid system and the fights that we had. We had so much talent, like you said, the creation of sweaters, white sweaters that turned to black, that turned to banners, that turned to this, and that education on the ground was phenomenal, you know. And if you think back, do you think you would have done anything differently? And especially now that you know where we are, what we've achieved. We've achieved a lot. We mustn't take that away from the system. But if you, as an administrator or as the young Henriette, the 13-year-old, 14-year-old, would you have done things differently if you had the chance? I just ask, there's no right or wrong answers. It doesn't matter. But just for your own thing, if you look back, could you have done things differently?
I would have chosen the same path. I think it was a rich path. Yes, there were some hiccups. The trauma, the anger that we are having. We struggled as youngsters involved back then in what we have gone through, the pain and anger that we have gone through, the hardships in terms of being on the run and not being able to go home and having issues and trust issues and all of those things, you know.
Who to trust, basically. Also.
Yes. And being angry at not having had a use and how it affects you in later parts of life. It did affect me, you know, because I didn't have a life, a normal use life, so forth and so on. I wanted an extended use, you know, some stuff like that. So no, I wouldn't. If I had to make the choices, I would have done the same choices. I think that who I am, where I come from my family, and how I was brought up as a young child, is you are selfless. You serve, you know. You serve, your doors must be open for others, you must feed others, you must assist wherever you can. That's my maternal and paternal grandparents.
I think it goes back to what we struggled for, which was servant leadership.
Yes.
And that's what we need so sorely today.
Right. So just having to bring it back now, if I have to put it back today for what we had. If you remember, when we were in the struggle and we were in organizations, we had very little money. Today, people can't work because they don't have money. They first want to draw up the proposal and get the budget and then work.
It's not just money. They want a million.
Exactly.
A million. Every time I hear something, then it's a million
and something. Yes.
It's incredible.
Just to start up and so forth. So eventually, I got married. Got married to my boyfriend at the time. My boyfriend at the time, him and Anwar and them, Miss Clement, they were all incarcerated together in the Ashley Forbes trial. Okay. Incarcerated. I was doing my thing. They came out in 91. In 93, I think we got married. Yes, we decided, okay, we're gonna get married in 93. Let's see if this thing is gonna work. And yes, so got married. Moved out of the area. He was studying. They came out of prison. He was studying. So the agreement was, you study, you finish, I go work, I work, and then with you done studying, then I go study. Then I fell pregnant following year, 95. We have one son. But I kept on, so UDF closed down. I moved to Business Skills and Development Center, which is an NGO that we trained the first black administrators. That time we were still under apartheid. And I've been working there since 1991, and I worked there for a good 18 years. So I was lecturing and doing my studies as I was part-time studying because now I had a child. Did my BCom honors. After that, went into masters in adult education and so forth. So I love studying. I love knowledge. I love knowing.
Fantastic. And the one thing that comes out, and I've interviewed now quite a few people, in spite of all these hardships, we made it through.
Yes.
You know,
We make
which
it
is
work.
absolutely
Yes.
fantastic,
Yes.
and the commitment to do and go further is fantastic. I'm going to cut off here. Maybe we should arrange maybe another session sometime to explore the other things that you've done, and I'm sure that you have done many things, and I salute you. And I think
just a wrap up with
okay,
two
sorry.
sentences.
Yes,
Just a
of
wrap
course.
up. So with all of these things, I've always been involved in NGOs, in marginalized communities. I've worked with farm workers also in Sekula Sonke, trade union. So that's that. So then I got divorced and I decided I'm going to give at least a minimum 2 years for my community. I'm coming back to Bonteheuwel, so that's where I'm at now, coming back to Bonteheuwel. Now we formed the Bonteheuwel Development Forum, which is based on street committees, building people's power. So those very same stories of teaching, printing your own, silk screening your own sweaters, we're doing it here.
Wow.
Very same story of building capacity of women, building second-tier leadership, we're doing that here. We're starting from the bottom with nothing, working for ourselves. So I'm trying to instill that we work for what we have as an organization, and let's build through people's power so that we can see to our own issues, take our power back. That's where I'm at today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Henriette. I know we've gone a little bit over the time that we slotted we meant to, but it is fantastic hearing the stories. It is absolutely, and the role that you've played in it. And upliftment of people that you didn't really need to care for. And this was the other thing that I mentioned to one of our to my previous episodes, is that at the end of the day you could have been fine. You could have bought the house in Bishop's Court if you wanted, but you chose to give yourself selflessly, and that in my view is a hero. You know, somebody that can give without expecting anything in return. Thank you so much for your commitment and your leadership that you've shown to a lot of people, and I think we can only admire you.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Sean.
Henriette.
Okay.